Hello everyone, my name is Prasanjit and today I tried something new. I joined the DevOps Conf Amsterdam today and I hosted an Openspace session. So this was a new format for me because I have spoken at public events and conferences but never been a part of an Openspace. It's a kind of a unconference, like where you have freewheeling talks, no presentations, no slides. So you just talk about your experiences, choose a certain topic, and people join in and leave your session at their will. So there is no agenda, nothing, but it's a real surprise for everyone in the end when you get to learn a lot of things from other people which are informal but help you stay in perspective. So my topic was how do we measure the impact of DevOps. So lots of good folks joined in and I have the presentation for you coming up in a while. But before that, what was my learning, what was my intention of hosting this Openspace session on measuring the impact of DevOps? We all know, and it is widely said, that you cannot manage what you cannot measure. I wanted to learn, like, what do other DevOps folks measure? How do what are the metrics they measure? How do they do that? If there is a tool that they use or any particular dashboards, because different people use different types of CI/CD mechanisms, CI/CD tools. Someone may be doing Jenkins, someone uses say cloud native stuff like Amazon pipelines and so on. So how do they do that? Is there a standard practice? And what are the practices that people adopt to measure success of DevOps? So that was the topic in mind, and I went in there to learn from others. So that was my sole intention, and I had certain things in mind. For example, I was well versed with DORA metrics because we use that in our organization. So let me give you a brief overview so we are all at the same page, and then we'll head on to the Openspace discussion. Now, through 6 years of research, a DevOps research and assessment team, or DORA, has identified 4 key metrics. They indicate the performance of a software development team, like using these 4 metrics that define the performance. So the number 1 is deployment frequency. It tells how often an organization successfully releases to production. Then comes the lead time for changes. That's the amount of time it takes a commit into a repository to get into production. And then comes the change failure rate, the percentage of deployments causing a failure in production, the time to restore a service. So that is the time or how long it takes an organization to recover from a failure in production. So at a high level, deployment frequency and lead time for changes measure velocity, while change failure rate and time to restore service measure the stability. And by measuring these values and continuously iterating to improve on them, a team can achieve significantly better business outcomes. So these are the notes. Now let's get into the conversation in the open spaces and see what is in store for us to learn from other folks' experiences. Let's get started. The topic in my mind was, how do we measure DevOps? Do you all do it today? And if you do it, how do you do it? Do you have some tools and dashboards that you use to do that? And of course, I have heard about the 4 keys that Google and DORA provide. Like, for example, you measure the deployment frequencies, you measure the lead time to changes, and you measure the failure rates of your pipelines. and the time to restore, like if you have a failure, how much time do you take to get things back again. So we do that, but not most of us. Whenever we start adopting DevOps, we focus on, okay, get the pipelines done, have everything automated, what are the tools we are going to use, but we normally do not pay attention to continuous measurement. So your thoughts?
Cool. Yeah, cool. Good question. I actually train teams with a workshop to start measuring themselves. By the way, the fifth day they do is availability. So is your how available is your application to the customers from a customer point of view? So not uptime and stuff like that, but can a customer put in an order on your web shop, for instance? Does that still work? Is that still available? So that's the fifth metric they added, I think last year or 2 years ago. But what I do is, like in the company I work with, they use Jira, for instance. So I teach them that you can get up the sprint reports and have a look at the age of your stories. And low-performing teams often have a story time or lead time for this instance of over 300 days. So that's the first thing I do with teams. Check that report, make a custom dashboard, on Miro or Miro or in Confluence, and put on that metric and update that metric each sprint. And then you can see that you really need good backlog management to improve on that metric. So that's a basic one. And the other one I add as well is predictability. In predictability, I calculate with what the team estimates of story points they want to put in and what they actually achieve. And the more predictable they are, the more they reach the 100%, and the more they know, they have an understanding of the team performance. So if they deliver too much, it's not good, because then the customer is surprised with new features that they didn't put marketing in for instance. And if you deliver too low, then customers are surprised they don't get the stuff you promised. And because every team has a different velocity, you use the predictability metric, so you can see how is my team delivering on what we promise.
All right.
So those are the two metrics to start with.
Okay, Ruud, do you, do something on that? Do you have any dashboards or something where you measure, continuously get to know what is happening, what is the output of applying DevOps practices, is it helping or not?
So one of the first thing I learned is I don't sell anything as DevOps, because DevOps is a buzzword and people think it's, I'm actually now as an infrastructure engineer working with Kubernetes, but people think DevOps is Kubernetes. You will learn at this conference that there's not much relation between Kubernetes and DevOps. So the first thing I do is always remove this label. So it's not about DevOps, it's about the things that you want to do or the aspects that you want to get from there. And there's a couple of things that are like really important, like CI/CD is like something that's really important, doing small iterations. So you get also small feedback, but you also have not much work in progress. You get some stream of things moving from development to production in a constant way. So those are like the most important things. And then you can sell this as DevOps, but there's many 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 methods
that's what
do it on small iterations.
See, what I was saying here is, like, if we have certain methods, we should measure it, like, to see whether they are working or not. So what do you think? Like, you're saying CI/CD, so we should, if we are doing CI/CD, we should see whether adopting that and practicing it is really helping, or is it taking more time? Is it making things complicated for the developers to understand, or is it just an initial onboarding issue and later on it gets into track and makes things faster? So
I think it's always about improvement. So, and it depends on the current state. So if the current state is okay, people can work with it and they're fast and they're happy with it, there's not much to improve. But if it's blocking people or preventing people from moving forward, then it's probably better to.
Yeah.
The nice thing about CI/CD is that it's all automated, and especially if you use something like GitOps, that Git triggers all the actions. There's no humans involved. So if there's something wrong, you can see the system. Everyone can improve the system, and also you can measure. Because there's no human actions, you can measure everything. So this is the easiest part.
But
how fast can you go from coding to production? That's if you have this fully automated, you can measure it, and then you can see how effective it is. But just these numbers are also not the only truth. It's also about how people perceive this and how.
Yeah, I agree to it to a certain extent. But yeah, there is a human touch in the beginning, like when we go into the left of the pipeline where the developers are working, like that is where it all starts. So say a developer is writing code and he wants to compile and build it, so that phase right from the time he commits, it can be taken over by CI/CD. But in case there is a failure and you get a feedback loop, like there is a failure in the code, it fails to compile, and then you get a response, say in form of a Slack alert or something, and that guy gets on to fix the thing. So then like the time taken to get back into action, those things, like when it comes to engineering management, they might want to measure it and see how often these failures happen, how much time we take to get back into the business, and so on. So that's where sometimes it's needed, like to measure the impact that DevOps brings rather than doing things manually. But you are right in the thing that you said, like in the end, the objective is to get everything going, get everything running as best as possible. That's right.
Yeah, but I think it's you can measure this in two different ways. Like the CI/CD, there's a lot of data, there's a lot of things going on, and the tickets are just moving a bit slower. So just having one ticket, maybe your first pipeline everything is fine, but maybe there's some feedback loops in there. If you're coding, you're not even hitting the CI/CD, maybe there's things to improve there. So it's different ways of measuring, and like moving the tickets is in the end the most important, but it's also, you need to rely on data from Jira, for example, or some other ticket system to do this, and you need to do some proper management to get your information right there.
Right.
But it's different data.
That's what even.
But also, like
Mick said that using Jira and the boards that help us to keep our objective on the tasks that we do, and
But the interesting one, can I raise one comment? Like the interesting part is like if your ticket is not moving, so it's stuck in progress state or in coding or in review.
Right.
If there's one of the stages is slow, what makes it slow? That is really interesting. So then you want to have other data, or at least you have more. It's like an agile board is probably not going to help you that much on this matters. But like, does your pipeline take 40 minutes to run tests? Does it take 2 hours? Does it deploy to production? Is it 1 minute? Is it 10 minutes? 1 hour? What? So it depends a bit on the context.
That also matters, because the faster, because one of the key objectives of DevOps is velocity, increasing the speed of deployments. Like say a company used to do deployment, one push into the production in 15 days. Now using DevOps, you can do multiple releases even in the same day. Like you can have multiple functionalities of your website or app going into production on the same day, because you are automating everything. Or if you are building infrastructure, that is also, like say if you are migrating something into the cloud or from one cloud to another, then it would normally take days if we do it the normal way as we are used to as system admins. So, but now if you use Ansible or Terraform, tools like these, so it compresses the time by, from days to minutes. So yeah.
How big is your company?
Ours is like, it's a video streaming provider, Stars Play. It's a streaming provider similar to Netflix, but we are in the Middle East, so we focus on Arabic content. So we serve, in terms of customers, we serve 2 million concurrent customers. So company wise, we are small, like a number of people working around say 100, but the serving, like the amount of customers we serve is huge. Like you have 2 million concurrent all the time. So the challenges there for DevOps comes in form of maintaining resiliency, like more than measuring pipelines and how much time it takes to roll out a new feature. There it's more upon how quickly you can scale, because say you have a weekend and you have a soccer match going on, so then suddenly you will see 50,000 customers out of nowhere, and if you are not ready, like as I said, when we are using a Terraform or something to scale up quickly, so then it becomes difficult. So there, yeah, you reminded me of a good point. Like there we have seen normal scaling algorithms even sometimes fail to work. Like say you have a trigger on CPU usage, like when a CPU hits 80%, add 2 more servers, something like that. But sometimes it is a memory intensive task, so the CPU remains normal, but memory gets used up and everything is slowing down. And sometimes it's on the number of requests you are getting, but CPU and memory are fine, but still you cannot serve because all your Nginx or proxy servers are choked up with requests. So there you have to measure the patterns, and based on that discuss how you can decide how you can go ahead with scaling up, or what algorithm you should use for the scale up, and so on.
What do you use to host?
Yeah.
How do you scale?
Yeah, what we do is we use ECS. We are hosted on Amazon. So in ECS, you have your ALBs, load balancers. So there we measure the CPU memory number of requests, and based on that we set up some rules to trigger addition of new instances. So we have some scripts which are connected to some agents like Prometheus. We put Prometheus agent on each of the nodes. They get the metrics from there, send it back to our script, which is continuously monitoring, like what are the number of nodes right now, should we scale up, and so on. So that's how we measure it and scale
the camera.
Hello.
You're back.
So, Prasanjit, you left. What happened?
It was lights out for some time,
Okay.
and then everyone is back together.
Okay. Cool. Well, can we come back to the metrics stuff?
Yeah,
because I really like that. And I always think about it. I put a post-it on the Miro board explaining what I meant with predictability. But I also think we should always take in consideration is what Peter Drucker said: what you measure improves. So when you use metrics to monitor your performance, your team performance, or your application performance, if you keep that in mind, it makes you choose the right metrics. Because if you, for instance, choose to measure velocity, then people will just add more story points to a story of the same weight it was before. So the velocity improves, but the performance doesn't.
And you will get stuck at some point.
Yeah.
This doesn't scale.
Yeah, we want to improve. So if we measure the wrong things, we are improving on the wrong things. So on each measurement, we need to think, okay, what if this improves? How does it happen? Do we want to improve it? What is exactly the stuff that will improve? If we want to improve measure velocity, we should measure predictability, for instance. It doesn't matter how big our stories are. Lead time, yeah, I think that's one good one. Cycle time is a good one. Michael.
Yeah, I've got a good comment because we also did this kind of measurements, and we also had the same issue that people started to add more story points, and it was just an explosion of points, nothing else. So we totally dropped that, and we actually focus on most painful issues that people are experiencing when working, like, okay, oh my god, this pipeline failed again, and so on. So we more like focused on resilience and trying to get things working and counting how many specific things failed, but not because of the developers like doing errors in the applications, but the instability of the infrastructure. Like we use GitLab, and we have some runners that are sometimes loaded with resources, and we measure how bad they are performing and how many times they fail during the sprint. And based on that, we focus to try to fix it, because right now we have, let's say, 20 minutes of deployment and CI systems, and it's 20 minutes failed or wasted if the pipeline fails. Yeah. And people are annoyed by retries. So we try to focus on that. Also, we from time to time talk with the people from the other teams, asking them what's their main problems, because they usually are not aware of the problem that they have problem, or they cannot articulate it unless we talk with them directly and ask them, can you show us what do you do? And we can see that, for example, some services are slow, and they say, yeah, it's always slow. And then we just focus on that. But it shouldn't be slow, it should be much faster. So we actually carefully look what people are doing. The third thing is getting a response from the teams that are doing stuff directly, very close with the customers. And we add some extra metrics to see how for example, because we have a document processing pipelines like OCR and running over the machine learning models, and then we produce the text documents from that, and we measure how many times, for example, given model is loaded. So what's the memory pressure? Because sometimes people say that, well, after training a model and uploading this to the pipeline, it's slow, but how much slow? They don't understand that you cannot say, yes, it's slower than before. How many times? I don't know. So we add the metrics to see when it's exactly slower.
So I added on the Miro the pipeline running time deviation to the normal. So you actually know about what the mean time or the average time is of the pipeline.
That's a good idea.
And you measure what the deviation is.
Yeah, but we have a problem because it's pretty easy to get that when you have a constant flow of the data, right? Like 24/7. But our the queues are very specific, like burst traffic. In, let's say, we have 10,000 documents between 9 a.m. and 10 a.m., like 1 hour, and they are slowly processed over the day. So we are thinking right now how to measure if, for example, the queue is gonna be not finished in given timeline. I guess that's task for us for the next sprint.
Yeah.
But if I can zoom out a bit, so like what is really nice about the question, like what do you want to measure? There's these DORA metrics that are like key, and but they give like a really high overview. Then like Mikael, how do I pronounce your name? Michael? I am muted.
Yeah, Michał or just Michael. You can call me Michael.
Michael. But there's also like specific problems. So there's problems or frequent problems. So you start measuring that a bit more. and monitor that. But then there's also global problems, like global CPU, global things. So it's like, if you want to check what you can measure, it's a million things. So then you should take some things like what should have a bit more focus, what can we automate, what has different patterns. Also, I learned something really nice. It was some podcast on DevOps, what to measure. And someone said, don't measure the CPU of your machines, because your end user doesn't care about the CPU.
Exactly.
They care about the response times probably. So I have a lot of alerts on CPUs.
Yeah, the experience matters for them. Like they don't care about their, I mean, your CPU or whether you're hitting 100.
Actually, we had the opposite example, because in previous company I was working on video processing, and we set up alerts if the CPU was not utilized enough. Like if it was 30%, it means something is wrong, because it should be 100% all the time.
You should milk it out. Like you should get the most out of the money you are spending.
Exactly, yeah. So it really depends on what you're doing. Web service, yes, you can go up to 70% but there's a lot of different stuff that you should care, especially latency, right?
But it's really nice what you mentioned, like you had a specific problem and you added metrics to this specific problem to at least have this conversation. And then I really hate it when people say, it's slow, it's fast. And they probably talk about the same 100 millisecond or 1 second or whatever. Let's put some numbers there so we can argue over the facts over 1 second and not over fast or slow, because you might talk about the same thing or different moments in time, and then you have the data, and then you can start to see what the problem is and also improve it and see it over time.
Yeah, it's really important what's the context of this performance, fast and slow, because for some systems 1 second is fast and for other 1 second is terribly slow. On the other hand, like 4 hours for some like syncing videos across the AWS regions was super fast. 4 hours for 1 petabyte, right? But for other solutions was just too slow.
Right. So what I see, there is a pattern. Like you are measuring two things basically. One is the speed or velocity of anything, and the second is the stability, whether the platform is stable or not.
Yeah. I think it's very important also not to measure everything, because you're gonna be overwhelmed with the number of metrics.
Yeah, what I do with the starting with the teams that start measuring themselves in this workshop, I let them put up to a maximum of 9 metrics, but most teams only take 1, 2, or 3. So, and it is hard enough to measure 3 metrics in a sprint, but it helps. And then they have in the sprint review, for instance, or in the retrospective, they decide, okay, are we going to keep this metric, or are we going to introduce a new one, or are we going to automate our metrics dashboard?
So in the end, you review, like in each retrospective, you review those metrics. Yeah, that's good.
Yeah, because retrospective is about how is the team performing, and that these questions should be there. It's not about letting up a kite or accelerating a race car. It's about how is our performance and how can we improve on that, and metrics help with that.
I've got a question. How often do you realize that you actually have to drop metrics or replace it with another?
If we reach performance, for instance, I had a team that went from a lead time of 300 days to 100, to below 100. And they said, yeah, okay, it's a bit stable now. Should we put it on the dashboard? Is it there for our improvement? Or is it there to inform people that we are still on par? Well, no, it's for our improvement. So we know we achieved it and we're going to measure it in a year or so. But for now, we're going to leave it. So yeah, keep it simple, your measure dashboard, and decide what you want to improve based on the results of the previous sprint or the previous month. I don't care if you run sprints or not, but you need to reflect in a moment and have a look on the metrics.
Yeah, we also had one problem that in current situation, we have very interesting problem. Like we thought that one of the most commonly used models will be used in the next year, but apparently the research team created a new model, and it started to work amazingly well. And suddenly we decided, okay, we actually have to switch to another one, and we actually have to change the things we did previously because how we designed some stuff. So I guess that quarterly reviews of what's ahead of us is working for us.
Yeah, that's good. That's good.
With people with experience, we know that some things will not escape, right? Logging, metrics, and so on. But based on the product itself, we know it's going to be very fluid.
Yeah, cool. I want to come back to the Michael as well. Talked about the number of pipelines, not in the red. I worked in a team as a developer, and we had a Jenkins board up, and it was like we managed 10 applications, so we had at least 10 pipelines. We used GitFlow before, so we had a lot more. But it was forbidden to not act on a red pipeline. So every time a red pipeline showed up, everybody stood up and fixed the pipeline. So the board was always green. And it's a real-time dashboard. So you make sure with that metric, with that dashboard, that you're always prepared to deploy to production. So I think that's a good one to have it on screen in the development room or on another monitor and always monitor that one. So I wouldn't even wait to until the retrospective. I just put it up where you are developing and see the pipelines you're running.
Yeah, we have this in Openspace, but right now with remote work, we switched to notification on Slack that the pipeline is failing. And we have usually one person per sprint that is handling this kind of issues.
Yeah.
And let's say that there's a rotation role that is focusing on helping other teams, while the other people are focusing on working with or on their own tasks. It really helps. Sometimes they switch like 1 or 2 days because sometimes people say, oh, I have a lot of meetings today or running, so I'm not gonna focus. I can take over your role and just do this kind of stuff.
Yeah, and we added to that we as a team found it most important that it was always up and running. So it was not a dedicated job. It was a job of everybody. So when a pipeline, somebody was already working on the pipeline, and others asked him, can we help make it green again? You know? So it's not one person. For if he or she doesn't know how it works or needs some help, we all in the team should instantly help that person to get it back to running again. I think that's the teamwork we're looking for.
That's right. So it's a shared responsibility even to get things back into action.
Yeah, and you can have a dedicated person, but he or she should yell when it's red, so the right people can help that person.
Yeah, but we also really stress out not to annoy some people because, like, for example, we had an issue with working hours. Like people are saying there's too many distractions. So we right now have a dedicated, right now only 2 hours slot across the whole organization. So you're not allowed to have meetings in that time or let's say poking people publicly or writing messages directly unless they already decided they're gonna work together. So it's really helping us to get a better focus on work. I think some people are able to extract even more hours per day, but it really depends on the teams, right?
Yeah, I think that should be a team issue, not a directive, so to say.
That's right. Yeah, I think
that's all for this round.
Time, so all right. Yeah.
Thanks.
There's another round of open spaces, right?
Yeah, right now.
Rounds.
Thank you.
Like
Thank you
4
everyone
minutes.
for your insights.
Yeah, oh yeah.
Thanks. Bye. See you.
Yeah, you too. Thanks.
Yeah.